Hashtag Ashley's POV. He plunged deep into her core, thrusting with vigor until all she could sense was him. A breathy moan escaped her lips, a sound so enticing that it sent waves of pleasure coursing through his body. Her hips undulated, drawing him even deeper into her until, "Hey, little Ash. We're here to steal you away from your books for a bit." Ryan burst through the door, with Blake trailing closely behind. Ashley gasped, quickly placing the book on the bed. A blush rushed to her cheeks as she adjusted her glasses. "Oh, God, this is so embarrassing," she thought, pressing her back more firmly against the headboard. A twinge of self-consciousness washed over her. Ryan plopped down on the bed, sprawling his arms and legs across the soft mattress. "I'm so jealous of your bed," he groaned, stretching until his hand landed on her thigh. There was an awkwardness in that simple touch. She could feel Blake's eyes on her, scrutinizing her intently. Finally, she couldn't bear it any longer and met his gaze. Those blue eyes made her catch her breath, and she quickly looked away. "What were you reading there, Lay?" His tone held a hint of amusement, which only made her more flustered. Before she could respond, he reached over and snatched the book.
"Hey!"
A silent protest escaped her parted lips. She sprang up from the bed, her feet hitting the wooden floor with a thud. A sense of panic started to rise within her. Her long, loose black curly hair tumbled wildly over her shoulder. It reached down to her bum, and she had no intention of cutting it. Blake chuckled, holding the book out of her reach. A feeling of helplessness washed over her. His blue eyes scanned the words, and her heart started pounding. "Oh, God, please don't read it out loud," she silently pleaded in her head as she tiptoed to try and grab the book from his hand. She let out a frustrated sigh when her efforts were in vain. He was clearly taller than her. She could hear Ryan's amused chuckles as he watched her struggle. "What great friends I have," she thought sarcastically, a pang of annoyance shooting through her. "And he thrust into her core," Blake began, his eyes quickly locking onto hers. Her breath hitched when his blue eyes darkened. His brow arched in amusement as he studied her. A wave of embarrassment washed over her like a tsunami. "Now, Lay, aren't you a bit too innocent for these kinds of books?" He'd said in a mocking tone. His black hair curled on his forehead, and his long lashes were so enviable that she was almost ashamed to admit it. His straight nose led to a pair of soft lips that were now curled into a smirk. He was incredibly handsome, and this realization made her heart skip a beat. The blush on her face deepened. She was sure she looked as red as a tomato. Ryan's laughter filled the room, so loud that she worried her parents would come in to see what was going on. A sense of dread settled in her stomach. She didn't want to be embarrassed in front of them. Knowing Blake, he wouldn't pass up the opportunity to tease her. No one knew about her secret stash of erotica novels hidden under the bed. But now, her secret was out in the open, and a feeling of humiliation engulfed her. She groaned aloud, curling her fingers into a fist and punching Blake in the torso. He let out a surprised breath, and she took the chance to jump up slightly and pry the book out of his hands. A sense of triumph briefly flared within her. "Why did Mom let you guys in?" She whined, mortified that Blake had read those words so loudly. She quickly stuffed the book into the waistband of her sweatpants, hoping Blake wouldn't try to take it again. A feeling of unease still lingered. His blue eyes flickered to the book in her sweatpants, and a mischievous glint passed through them. She shook her head quickly, jumped on the bed, and landed on Ryan. "Shit, Ash, I think you broke my hand," he grunted, pushing her off. A moment of awkwardness ensued. "Stop being so dramatic, you big baby," she laughed and lay down on her stomach. The book pressed uncomfortably against her front, but she refused to turn over in case Blake found another way to take it. A constant sense of wariness filled her. Blake smirked, showing his white teeth. "Are you trying to keep Raven close to your you-know-what?" He was referring to the male character in the book. She gasped at his crude remark, feeling her face heat up even more. It seemed impossible, but her embarrassment was reaching new heights. "I got to say that I'm jealous."
"Devo dire che sono geloso," he chuckled.
"Oh God, another day, third wheeling."
"Oh Dio, un altro giorno di terza ruota," Ryan replied.
Ashley couldn't understand their language, and they always used it against her. A feeling of being left out washed over her. "Oh, come on, guys. You know I can't understand when you speak Italian, she groaned in protest. Ryan sat up and ruffled her hair. Then what can we use against you? He laughed. She swatted at his hand and blew away the strands that had fallen on her face. A small sense of irritation welled up. Why are you guys so early anyway? It's only 9 a.m., she asked, shifting to get more comfortable with the book pressing against her. Blake noticed and gave a mischievous look, but she glared at him, silencing whatever he was about to say. A spark of defiance flared within her. He came to sit on the bed, a bit too close to her. She could smell his cologne and almost moaned out loud. He's your best friend, Ashley. Stop thinking about him like this, she warned herself. She blamed the erotica novels she'd been reading. A sense of guilt mixed with her attraction. It's actually not early, nerd. You're just mad we interrupted your reading session. And I'm mad you've never told me about your little fantasies, Blake chuckled. Ashley gasped and slapped his muscular thigh. A flash of anger shot through her. These aren't my fantasies, she argued, though her voice lacked conviction even to her own ears. A sense of doubt crept in. Our little Ash isn't so innocent anymore, Blake, Ryan laughed, high-fiving Blake over her head. She let out an annoyed puff. A feeling of being picked on settled in. Would you guys stop? She whined, utterly mortified. A wave of helplessness washed over her again. We'll stop if you come to Bell's with us, Ryan insisted. Bell's was a small restaurant just a few minutes from her house. This was a place where many teens would go to eat and hang out instead of doing their homework. As much as she hated socializing, Blake and Ryan always made sure she tagged along with them. A sense of resignation filled her. Fine, but let me take a shower and get dressed first, Ashley grunted and got up. A small glimmer of hope that she could compose herself before going out. Hashtag Ashley's POV. Ashley made her way downstairs, already anticipating the loud noise from the boys. She groaned and rolled her eyes when she reached the bottom. You guys are so loud, she whined as she walked over to the 3 boys on the couch. They were engrossed in watching football. A feeling of annoyance welled up within her. Fucking Christ, did you see that? Arden yelled, throwing some popcorn at the TV. Boo. He grunted before shoving a handful of popcorn into his mouth. The excitement in the room was almost overwhelming. What a fucking loser. Ryan agreed, his face turning a shade of red. Whether it was from anger or the heat in the house, she wasn't sure. A sense of chaos filled the air. This guy sucks ass.
Questo ragazzo succhia il culo.
Blake chuckled. The others joined in, leaving Ashley completely confused. Does Arden even know what Blake just said? A feeling of being out of the loop washed over her. Am I seriously being ignored? She thought, letting out an irritated breath. She trudged over to the kitchen, leaving the boys shouting at the TV. So much for, hurry up and get ready. A sense of abandonment settled in. She took off the scrunchie from her wrist and gathered her silky black hair into it, pulling it back until the strands were off her back. A few tendrils still fluttered on her forehead, but it didn't bother her too much. Morning, Mom, she greeted. Her mom was busy cooking lunch, her back turned as she stirred a spoon in the pan. A sense of warmth from the familiar domestic scene. Her mom turned just enough to show her face and gave her a warm smile. Morning, baby. You woke up late. You're lucky I saved you some breakfast. Your dad and brother almost finished it all, she laughed. A feeling of gratitude for her mom's thoughtfulness. Ashley sat down on one of the stools, resting her forearm on the cold marble counter. Well, technically, I woke up early. I was just busy reading, she admitted sheepishly. A twinge of guilt for neglecting breakfast. Her mom turned off the stove, holding the spoon as she spun around to face her. The spoon was coated with a red sauce, the aroma making her stomach growl. Her mom walked over to her. A sense of anticipation filled her. How many times do I have to tell you that your stomach comes before books, Ashley? Books can wait. I don't want you to starve, she scolded as she got closer. A feeling of being cared for, yet a bit chastised. Ashley chewed on her bottom lip and looked down, feeling like a little kid. I know, Mommy. This one was just interesting, she finished with a blush. She prayed her mom wouldn't notice her reddening face. She should have left her hair down. A sense of embarrassment welled up. Her mom held out the spoon and motioned for her to taste. She ran her finger along the spoon, coating it with the sauce, and then sucked it into her mouth. She moaned, savoring the flavor. a sense of pleasure from the delicious food. Her mom's eyes widened in satisfaction, a beaming smile on her lips. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulder, the tips gently touching the end of her blue T-shirt. Her eyes crinkled at the corners as she continued to smile. She hadn't aged a bit. She was as beautiful as ever. No wonder Dad couldn't keep his hands off her. A feeling of admiration for her mom. "It's good?" her mom asked, though she already knew the answer. A sense of shared understanding. "When have you ever cooked anything bad?" "Well, except for that burnt turkey last year," she joked before giggling. Her mom narrowed her eyes, which were identical to hers. Her glasses slid down her nose slightly, and she pushed them back into place and smiled at her mom. "Now can I have my breakfast, Mom?" she asked. A sense of eagerness for food. "Mrs. Collins, can I have some breakfast too?" Blake strolled in. He stopped behind her, his body radiating heat. His shirt brushed against her back, and she involuntarily sucked in a sharp breath. "Stop it, Ashley. He's your best friend." A sense of nervousness mixed with attraction. "Lay, what's the point of eating when we're about to go to Belle's?" He laughed and tugged her ponytail. She turned to look at him. Green eyes met blue, and they stared at each other. "What's the point of asking for breakfast when we're about to leave?" she countered. She turned around and shrugged. "Besides, I skipped breakfast and I'm starving," she said. A sense of determination to get her food. "Now, whose fault is that?" She could hear the amusement in his tone, the way his voice took on a husky edge when he tried to rile her up. "You should really blame Raven for your hunger. If you weren't so busy." She spun around quickly, her face showing her embarrassment and annoyance. He was joking around with her mom present. For God's sake, her mom didn't even know she owned these books. She'd sneaked off to buy them at the local library nearby. Whenever her dad gave her money, she'd save it to buy these novels. Now, her secret was out, all thanks to the blue-eyed boy grinning at her. He thought this was funny. What a so-called friend he was. A sense of betrayal mixed with anger. "But you haven't been thinking of him as just a friend lately, have you, Ash?" Her conscience mocked her. She got off the stool and grabbed his hand, pulling him along with her. "Leave the breakfast, Mom. I'm going to Belle's," she shouted over her shoulder. A sense of hasty escape. Her mom responded with a giggle. Great, now even her mom found her amusing. Blake's chuckle annoyed her, and she dropped his hand. She turned to glare at him, though she doubted she looked intimidating. A sense of frustration. His finger came up to massage the crease between her eyebrows. "Don't frown, Lay. You'll get wrinkles on that pretty face of yours," he said. She stepped back, feeling a slight tingle where his finger had touched her skin. She turned around and walked over to Ryan and Arden. Their eyes were fixed on the TV, too engrossed to notice her reaching for the remote. A sense of being unnoticed. Their eyes widened with anxiety as she focused on the screen. Her finger hovered over the off button before she finally pressed it. The screen went blank, and the boys' mouths dropped open. A sense of power in that simple act. "What the—" Arden started, but she shot him a glare. "If you finish that sentence, I'll tell Dad when he gets home from work," she warned. A sense of authority. He grumbled something under his breath and crossed his arms. He was 2 years younger than her, but he often acted like the older one. He was like a younger version of Dad. At just 15, he was almost as tall as Blake and had girls falling for him. A sense of contrast between them. She turned to Ryan, who was still staring at the black screen in confusion.
"Let's go, Ryan."
"I'm hungry," she said and turned around to walk towards the front door. A sense of urgency. "Where are you guys going?" Arden asked.
Belle's, Blake replied.
She opened the front door without waiting to see if they followed. She spotted Ryan's red Lamborghini and walked towards it. Her Converse shoes thudded on the pavement. She could clearly hear their loud footsteps behind her. A sense of anticipation for the outing. Someone's in a hurry to get to Belle's. Or maybe you're just eager to get back to your reading, Blake teased as he caught up with her. She ignored him, opened the car door, and plopped inside. The short, ripped jumpsuit she was wearing showed off her smooth, creamy thighs. She shifted to get more comfortable on the seat. Blake's eyes flickered to her thighs before he quickly looked away and closed the door harder than necessary. A sense of awkwardness in that moment. He and Ryan opened their doors at the same time and closed them. Blake turned in his seat and winked at her. "Don't worry, Lay. We'll get you back to your reading." And then we can practice what you've learned, he said. A blush crept up her face and stained her cheeks. Ryan laughed and mumbled something. Shut up, she mumbled and stared out of the window. A sense of embarrassment and annoyance. Ryan started the car, and a moment later, they were on their way to Belle's. Anxiety welled up in her as they got closer. She hated Belle's. It was always so crowded and reeked of teenagers. Even though she was one, she didn't want to be associated with them. They were rude and snobby. She only went because of Blake and Ryan. A sense of dread filled her. Hashtag Ashley's POV. Ryan was the first to enter, pushing open the intimidating glass doors. Ashley gulped, looking at the many faces in the small restaurant. She could already feel the claustrophobia setting in just by looking at it. A sense of panic welled up within her. She could hear the shouts and praises as Ryan made his presence known. She rolled her eyes, knowing they'd be surrounded by his admirers. She reached for her ponytail, split her black hair into two, and pulled them apart until the scrunchie was tight enough. A sense of trying to compose herself. She let out a breath when Blake came to stand beside her. She could smell his cologne, a hint of mint and aftershave. He saw her staring at the rowdy teenagers swarming around Ryan, bombarding him with questions. He knew his turn was coming next. A sense of shared situation. You know you should relax. They can't do anything to you. Ryan and I are here, he said. But that was the problem. When she wasn't with Blake and Ryan, they treated her like dirt. Granted, she didn't talk much, and she didn't want to talk to those snobby rich kids anyway. But it still bothered her that they were suddenly nice to her when the boys were around. They'd lose their scowls and judgmental looks, but it was different when she was alone. A sense of being treated differently. I guess this is what I get for being friends with the most popular guys in school. And, to top it off, they're incredibly good looking. Yeah, I was doomed from the start to get those hateful glares from the girls. A sense of resignation to her situation. She felt a weight on her shoulders and was brought back to reality. She turned and looked up at Blake, squinting as the sun's rays almost blinded her. Come on, he urged, pulling her along, his arm holding her close to his tall body. A sense of being pulled into the chaos. His scent was stronger now, almost overwhelming. Her heart skipped a beat, and then started pounding uncontrollably. Her palms itched to wrap around his torso, but she fought the urge. She didn't want the girls to think they were together or give them more reasons to treat her badly. A sense of self-restraint. He shouldered open the door, and like a magnet, everyone was drawn to him. She felt herself shrinking in his arms, and the familiar feeling of nervousness clawed at her. Sensing this, he squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. A sense of comfort in his gesture. Blake, man, are you coming to that party tonight? A boy with sandy, brown hair asked him. She was sure she'd seen him in one of her classes. He was probably one of those kids who sat at the back and put their feet up on the desk to seem cool. A sense of annoyance at the interruption. Blake, you still owe me that drink. A girl giggled flirtatiously. Her blonde hair, with blue tips, flowed down her back. The crop top she was wearing showed off her navel piercing, which almost made Ashley cringe. The ripped shorts were so tight, and she wondered how she could even walk. A sense of disgust at the girl's appearance. Questions flew at Blake, and Ashley was getting really annoyed. It wasn't like they wouldn't see him tomorrow. At least let her get her food first before she had to endure all this ridiculous flirting. A sense of impatience. She pulled Blake's arm off her shoulder and slipped away from the crowd. It was a smaller crowd compared to school. She spotted Ryan at a table, and when he saw her, he called her over. A sense of relief at finding a safe spot. Are you guys celebrities and just forgot to tell me? She groaned as she plopped down on the seat. A sense of exasperation. She reached for the menu and used it as a makeshift fan. With all those teenagers around her, she thought she might suffocate. Ryan threw his head back and laughed. Maybe we are, he chuckled and then shrugged. Or maybe we're just that good, looking and cool. Who could resist us, he said. A sense of annoyance at his arrogance. She snorted and adjusted her glasses. I do, she said. Ryan raised his eyebrow. Doesn't seem like it to me, he said, and then he looked at Blake. Her heart started pounding. Does he know I have a crush on Blake? Did I just admit I like him? Oh, God. What's wrong with me? A sense of panic and self-doubt. Thankfully, he didn't say anything more. Did you order already? She asked, even though she knew the answer. It was just a way to divert the unwanted attention from herself. A sense of desperation. He shook his head and picked up the menu. What's the point of looking at the menu? We already know what's on it. He chuckled and threw it on the table. She shrugged and did the same. True, she said, smiling at Blake. A sense of normalcy in the conversation. He looked uncomfortable and a bit annoyed. She couldn't help but let out a silent laugh. What's so funny? Ryan asked, pulling out his phone. A sense of amusement at Blake's discomfort. Blake's face. He looks constipated, she giggled, looking away from him. A sense of light-hearted teasing. I'm telling him you said that, Ryan sang, his eyes full of mischief. A sense of playfulness turning into worry. She narrowed her eyes at him.
Tattletale, she said.
He stuck out his tongue childishly and went back to tapping on his phone. Why are you calling him a tattletale? Blake's voice came from behind her. A sense of surprise at his sudden appearance. It startled her so much that she knocked over the salt shaker on the table, spilling the contents. Still clumsy, Blake clicked his tongue and sat down. His chair was opposite hers, giving her a good view of him. A sense of embarrassment at her clumsiness. She called me a tattletale because I threatened to tell him. She said you looked constipated, Ryan said, still typing away. It was probably one of those poor girls who thought she could change his player ways. Ryan and settling down with one girl? That was a joke. A sense of annoyance at Ryan's behavior. She kicked his shin under the table, feeling satisfied when she heard him hiss in pain. So, did you finally get rid of your admirers? She asked, trying and failing to change the subject. A sense of awkwardness in the conversation. So, I looked constipated, huh? Want to know how I look when I'm? He smirked, making Ryan burst into loud laughter. It drew everyone's attention, and she felt herself shrinking into her seat. A sense of extreme embarrassment. Her brows furrowed, and then her eyes widened as she understood what he meant. She stumbled over her words, not knowing how to respond. She was sure she was as red as a tomato right now. A sense of humiliation. Blake, baby. A feminine voice called out, and a sickly, sweet perfume filled the air. Ryan let out a grunt of displeasure, but didn't say anything. Ashley looked at the girl. Her blonde, curly hair spilled over her shoulders. The leather skirt she was wearing enhanced her curves, and the crop top was so tight that her breasts seemed ready to burst out. Didn't her parents see how she was dressed before she left home? If her dad saw her like that, she'd be in big trouble. A sense of shock at the girl's appearance. She turned to face Ashley, her baby, blue eyes clashing with Ashley's. Resentment flashed in those eyes before she composed herself. Ashley, she said. Stacy, Ashley retorted. A sense of hostility between them. Hashtag Ashley's POV. Stacy didn't stare for long and quickly focused on Blake. He didn't seem surprised to see her. Ashley wasn't either. None of them were. A sense of inevitability. Stacy plopped down on his thigh, one hand going around his head to pull him closer. Her shiny, red, painted nails mocked Ashley as she gently touched his jaw. A sense of jealousy welled up within Ashley. A moment later, their lips met, and a wave of jealousy washed over Ashley. Her stomach twisted at the sight, and she quickly looked away. She could feel her skin prickling, as if tiny needles were piercing it. Whether it was from hatred or shame, she wasn't sure. Shame that she was jealous. She had no right to be. After all, Stacy was his girlfriend. She hated this feeling, hated that she couldn't control it. A sense of self-loathing mixed with jealousy. She found herself making an excuse to go to the bathroom. Excuses. Her conscience mocked her. They didn't seem to notice her leaving, or maybe she did care because she felt a pang of hurt when Blake continued to kiss Stacy. It should be normal. She'd seen them do it so many times.
She should be used to it by now.
But she never could. Maybe that's why she'd become addicted to reading erotica novels. Her real life lacked any romance. A sense of sadness at her unrequited feelings. She pushed the chair back as she stood up. It was only when the chair made a scraping sound that Blake pulled away. His lips were red, raw, and swollen. Her heart ached at the sight. She averted her eyes, finding it unbearable to watch him enjoy kissing someone else. A sense of pain at the sight. His brows furrowed as he studied her. Where are you going? He asked. She wanted to run away, finding it hard to stay there any longer. But that would only raise suspicion. She didn't want him to think she had a problem with his girlfriend. But she did, and the little voice in her head kept reminding her. A sense of conflict within herself. "I'm going to the bathroom," she told him again. If he hadn't been so busy kissing Stacy, he would have heard her the first time. She wanted to mumble sarcastically so badly, but she held back. There was no point in giving him attitude. It wasn't his fault. It was hers for liking him in a way she shouldn't have. A sense of self-blame. He nodded, and Stacy rolled her eyes before pulling his lips back to hers. She looked at Ryan, and he made a fake gagging noise that made her laugh. "Order for me, would you?" "You know what I like," she said to Ryan. But it wasn't Ryan who answered. "Yeah, a hot dog and fries with ketchup on the side because you hate it on the fries," Blake said, pulling his lips away from Stacy's. She could tell Stacy was annoyed, but she couldn't help feeling a little rush at getting under her skin. A sense of satisfaction at getting a small victory. She smiled and raised an eyebrow. "You're missing something," she said. He rolled his eyes. "Oh, how could I forget? A large banana, chocolate milkshake," he said. She laughed and headed to the bathroom. As soon as she was alone in the stall, the tears she'd been holding back started to fall. She sniffled and sat down on the closed toilet seat. A sense of overwhelming sadness. She reached for the toilet paper and used it to wipe away the moisture from her eyes. Why was this so hard? Blake was her best friend. She shouldn't be jealous that he has a girlfriend. But she was, and it was getting harder to hide. She'd always had a crush on him, the boy who was her first friend, the boy who'd fought off her bullies in the 9th grade when Ryan wasn't around, the boy who'd unknowingly stolen her heart and never given it back. But now it felt like more than just a crush. A sense of realization about her feelings. "Did you see her?" A girl giggled as the bathroom door banged open. A moment later, the sound of heels clicking on the tiled floor approached her stall. She tensed up and pulled her feet up on the toilet seat. A sense of fear at the approaching voices. "Yeah, what an embarrassment," another girl cackled. Her eyes dropped to the floor, watching as their shadows disappeared. She would have sighed in relief if they'd actually left. But they didn't. "She's such an attention seeker. Did you see how Blake was holding her? She acts like a damsel in distress just to get them to like her." One girl snorted. The voices were getting closer. A sense of dread at being talked about. "Yes, it's so embarrassing that she tries to be with a guy who's already taken. It's a shame Blake only sees her as a friend," another girl said. Ashley's body went cold.
They were talking about her.
A sense of shock and pain at their words. The other girl cackled, the sound grating on her ears. "She's such a loser. I'm sure Blake and Ryan are tired of her following them around." One girl snorted, followed by laughter. Ashley's eyes started to blur, and she blinked away the tears. A sense of humiliation and self-doubt. "And she's ugly with those dumb glasses. I'd be ashamed to be seen with her." One girl giggled. Their words felt like a slap in the face, harsh and unforgiving. A sense of hurt at the cruel words. She swallowed her anger. A few tears escaped, and she angrily wiped them away. She hated showing weakness. A sense of determination not to show weakness. She got off the toilet quietly, trying not to let them know she was there. But a part of her knew they probably suspected. She reached out and touched the stall wall, peeking through the slit. She saw a blonde girl and could barely make out the other one. The blonde was busy applying lip gloss to her already shiny lips. She sighed, bracing herself for what would happen when she left the stall. A sense of anticipation of a confrontation. She opened the door, and they feigned surprise. They definitely knew she was in there. The brunette, whom she hadn't seen clearly before, stared at her with brown eyes, a sly smirk on her red, stained lips. A sense of hostility from the girls. "Oh, Ashley, right? Sorry you had to hear that," she said, pouting. Her blonde friend cackled. Ashley narrowed her eyes. She knew them from her calculus class. They'd never talked before. Everyone just thought of her as Blake and Ryan's friend who followed them around. A sense of being underestimated. She exhaled in annoyance. "Stop with the fake apology. We both know you knew I was in here," she said, calling out their nonsense. A sense of assertiveness. Hashtag Ashley's POV. The brunette's eyebrows raised, and her friend fell silent. Then a nasty smile spread across her lips, an unsettling sight. "Well, now you know how embarrassing you are to the boys," she said, waving her hand dismissively and then picking at her long nails. A sense of anger at the girl's words. Ashley looked for a way out. Confronting someone was not her thing. She never had the courage. She crossed her arms and straightened her stance, trying to look confident even though she felt anything but. A sense of self-doubt about her ability to stand up for herself. "The only one who should be embarrassed is you. Weren't you the girl who threw yourself at Blake last year, and then tried to get with Ryan a week later? And failed at both," she retorted. A sense of boldness she didn't know she had. "What the hell was wrong with me? Since when did I become like this?" She cringed at the thought. She hated cursing. A sense of surprise at her words. The girl gasped, her face turning red with shame. "How do you know about that?" she stammered. Now it was Ashley's turn to pick at her chipped nails. She felt a small sense of satisfaction knowing her comeback wasn't bad. Maybe it was just the anger from seeing Blake kiss Stacy. A sense of empowerment from standing up for herself. "We're best friends, remember? They tell me everything." She smirked and walked up to her. "I know all the embarrassing things you did to get their attention, Lucy."
"Don't make me remind you," she said.
With one last look at the two girls, she walked out of the bathroom with her head held high. But she didn't feel confident. In fact, she felt the opposite. This wasn't the first time this had happened. It was like a never-ending cycle. A sense of resignation to the situation. It felt like her feet were weighed down as she walked back to the boys, who unknowingly made every girl hate her. She sat down on the chair. Ryan looked up from his phone, his brows furrowing in confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked. A sense of being under scrutiny. Hearing Ryan's question made Blake look away from his annoyed girlfriend. His blue eyes studied her face. She looked away, afraid he'd see what she'd been hiding for years. A sense of fear of being discovered. She turned to Ryan. "Nothing's wrong," she mumbled, feeling nervous being the center of attention. She looked at the table and noticed they'd already ordered. She reached for her fries and stuffed them into her mouth. A sense of trying to distract herself. "You look like you've been crying, little Ash. What's wrong?" Ryan asked again, this time sounding impatient. She swallowed hard, not wanting to answer. She couldn't exactly say she'd been crying because Blake was kissing Stacy. So she lied, a stupid lie. A sense of desperation to avoid the truth. "It's nothing. Some girl was having a really bad time in the bathroom, and the smell made my eyes water. That's all," she said quickly, still not looking up to see their reactions. A sense of self-doubt about the lie. "The smell of poop made your eyes water? Really, Ashley? That's the best you could come up with?" A sense of self-mockery. There was a moment of silence before Ryan burst out laughing. The sound was so loud that everyone in the restaurant stopped what they were doing to see what was so funny. Ashley squirmed under their gazes. A sense of extreme embarrassment. "You," Ryan gasped, tears streaming from the corners of his eyes. "You cried because someone's poop smelled bad?" he laughed. His voice was so loud that everyone could hear. A sense of humiliation at his outburst. A blush of embarrassment spread across her face. She really should have left her hair down today. "Ryan, shut up," she hissed, reaching for the banana chocolate milkshake. She took a gulp and almost choked when he said the next words. "Was it her poop that smelled so bad in there?" he asked, pointing at Lucy, who was just coming out of the bathroom with her blonde friend. They both froze at Ryan's loud question. It was like he was doing it on purpose. A sense of anger at Ryan's thoughtlessness. Does he want them to kill me the next time I'm alone? She was thankful for her sharp tongue this once. But who knew what would happen next time? A sense of fear for the future. She turned to Blake, mortified, and pleaded with her eyes for him to tell Ryan to stop. He bit his bottom lip to hold back his laughter. He reluctantly nodded when he saw how uncomfortable she was. A sense of relief at Blake's understanding. "Ryan, man, leave it alone. You're embarrassing Lay," he chuckled. Stacy stiffened at the nickname. Ashley wouldn't admit it, but she secretly loved it, even though she pretended to be annoyed when he called her that. A sense of a hidden affection for the nickname. "Why do you call her Lay?" Stacy asked Blake, her angry eyes fixed on Ashley. Ashley shifted uncomfortably in her chair and took another sip of the milkshake. A sense of being put on the spot. Blake laughed and pulled Stacy closer. A pang of jealousy shot through Ashley, and she looked away. Don't be jealous, Stacy. It's just a nickname, and I've told you that before, he said. She could hear Stacy protesting, but she tuned her out. She didn't want to listen to her annoying voice. Blake had been with Stacy for a few months now, after supposedly giving up his playboy ways. Some people thought Stacy was a miracle for him. It hurt to see that she was the one who'd changed him. A sense of pain at Blake's relationship. Stacy had caught Blake's attention as soon as she walked into Western High. And she'd hated Ashley from the moment she saw her 5 feet 2 inches frame. A sense of being disliked without cause. So, we're going to the party tonight, Ryan announced. She raised an eyebrow and finished her milkshake. Tomorrow is a school day, Ryan, she pointed out. She didn't understand why teenagers loved getting drunk. It was such an unappealing sight. A sense of disapproval of the party. He rolled his eyes exaggeratedly. Oh, come on, Ashley.
Little, he said.
My dad wouldn't let me, she shrugged. She actually was glad her dad was strict. It was a good excuse to stay home and read. A sense of relief at having an excuse. Sneak out, he suggested. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. No way, she said. But we need a designated driver, he pouted. My hand hurts. I can't drive, she said flatly, and took another fry. A sense of determination not to go. Who cares if she comes? She likes her boring life. She can't handle a party, Stacy declared. Ashley looked at her, not liking the mocking look in her eyes. Her fist clenched under the table. Anger welled up in her, and she wanted to show Stacy that she could handle a party. Couldn't she? A sense of defiance. You know what, I'm coming, she snapped, adjusting her glasses. Was this peer pressure? A sense of giving in to the pressure. Hashtag Ashley's POV. The sun had set long ago, and the moonlight flooded through the open window. It was late, very late. Ashley silently prayed that her parents were sound asleep. If she got caught, she'd be in big trouble. That was the last thing she wanted. Her dad was extremely overprotective. She was surprised he allowed her to be friends with Ryan and Blake. He didn't trust any other guys around her. It was annoying, but embarrassingly, she'd only ever wanted one guy's attention. A sense of worry about getting caught. She sighed. She was curled up on the bed, her clothes hidden under the thick blanket that kept her warm. She didn't want her parents to burst in and see what she was wearing. They'd definitely know something was up. A sense of secrecy. A gentle, cold breeze brushed against her cheek. She stared out of the open window, counting the stars. She was a nervous wreck. She shouldn't have agreed to go tonight. She should have stayed home and read. Raven, the character from her book, would have kept her company. A sense of regret for her decision. A pebble hit the wooden floor. Her heart started pounding, knowing it was one of the boys coming to get her. She hesitated for a few seconds, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the nightstand. Her hands itched to grab the clock and throw it out the window. Maybe it would hit them on the head, and she'd have an excuse not to go. A sense of desperation to avoid going.
Lay.
A hushed voice hissed from outside. She groaned silently when she recognized Blake's voice. Really, Ryan? You sent him? She always felt uncomfortable around him after he'd been with other girls. Seeing him and Stacy kiss made her realize she'd never be as good as them. A sense of self-inferiority. Lay. Another impatient hiss. She nibbled on her lip and then groaned, throwing the covers off. She stood up from the bed and walked over to the window, looking down at Blake. She could barely make out what he was wearing, but the moon cast a soft glow on his face, making her catch her breath. A sense of attraction despite her discomfort. Shut up. Do you want my parents to hear you? She hissed, sticking her head out of the window and holding onto the sill. A sense of urgency to be quiet. He shrugged and smirked. It wouldn't be so bad if you got in a little trouble, Lay. Raven would be proud, he said. She gritted her teeth. Would he ever stop teasing her about this? She looked away from him and saw Ryan's car. Frowning, she looked back at him. Are you alone? Where's Ryan? She asked. A sense of wariness at being alone with Blake. Ryan's already at the party. He told me to come get you, he replied, seemingly unaware of how being alone with him made her feel. A sense of nervousness bubbling up. So, you're alone? She asked again, feeling the nerves in her stomach almost suffocating her. A sense of unease. She could sense his confusion. He didn't understand what he did to her. Yeah, he mumbled, sounding unsure. She sighed and nodded. A sense of resignation. Wait a minute, she said softly and pulled herself back into the room. She looked down at her outfit. The plaid skirt reached mid-thigh. She'd paired it with a white tank top, a jean jacket, and white Converse. But suddenly, she felt exposed. A sense of self-consciousness. She looked around and saw her black leggings discarded near the open closet. She nodded to herself and walked over to pick them up. She felt the thin material between her fingers, thinking about whether to wear them. A sense of indecision. "Lay, hurry up," Blake hissed. She groaned and finally decided to put on the leggings. At last, she felt a bit more comfortable. Who was she trying to impress anyway? She walked back to the window, feeling like a rebel. A sense of a new, found boldness. She climbed out of the window and carefully walked on the roof. She looked down at Blake. It wasn't that high, but the thought of falling made her nauseous. What if she broke something? A sense of fear of falling. She reached the edge, looking for the ladder her dad had left, but it was gone. She looked at Blake, alarmed. "There's no ladder," she almost screeched, feeling anxiety rising. Was her dad aware of her plans? A sense of panic. "Just jump, Lay. I'll catch you," Blake urged, getting into position. She looked him over. Yes, he was strong, but this was different. She could die. A sense of doubt about jumping. She shook her head vigorously and stepped back.
No way.
"Maybe this isn't meant to be. Have fun at the party," she said quickly. A sense of giving up. "Oh, come on. Don't back out now, Bambina," he said. "I'm scared," she admitted, looking at the lawn below. It seemed so far away. She was too high up. A sense of vulnerability. She looked into his blue eyes, and in the moonlight, she could see how blue they really were. Even from up here, they were captivating. His eyes softened. She took a good look at what he was wearing. He loved dressing in all black. Black jacket, black jeans, black shirt, black Converse. To some, it might seem intimidating, but that was just Blake. A sense of admiration for his appearance. "Don't be scared, Lay. I'd never let you fall. I'll always catch you. Trust me," he said softly, his eyes conveying something she couldn't quite understand. A sense of comfort in his words. "Oh, would you guys shut up? Goddamn it, Ashley, just jump. You're not going to die." "It's just a few feet," a voice snapped. She turned around and saw Arden through his open window. His room was next to hers. His lights were off, but the moon provided enough light to see him. She squinted. Was he eating a banana? A sense of surprise at Arden's presence. "Aren't you supposed to be asleep?" she asked, slipping into big sister mode. He raised an eyebrow and took a bite of the banana. "The same could be said for you, big sister." "Don't worry, I won't tell Dad you're sneaking out," he said. She let out a sigh of relief, but then tensed up when he continued. "Only if." He dragged out his eyes, which were just like Dad's, filled with mischief. "You give me $50, he said. She frowned. "I was saving that to buy books," she said. He shrugged and took another bite. $50 or no deal, he said. She thought about it. Give him her money and have no books? No way. It was a good excuse not to go. "Fine, I'll give you the $50 tomorrow," Blake agreed, ruining her almost happy moment. A sense of disappointment at Blake's intervention. "Deal." Arden smirked. "Now jump, Ashley." "Don't be a coward," he said. "Watch your mouth, Arden." "I'm still older, and I can tell Dad," she hissed and crossed her arms. "And I'm not a coward," she pouted. A sense of assertiveness as a big sister. She sighed and looked at Blake. She did trust him, and that made her walk to the edge. She took a deep breath and said a silent prayer. "Ready?" she asked nervously, watching as he opened his arms to catch her. He nodded with determination. A sense of trust in Blake. Closing her eyes tightly, she waited a few seconds, feeling the wind in her hair, and then jumped. Her breath caught in her throat as she fell. Was this what it felt like to die? A sense of fear of the unknown. She felt his arms wrap around her, pulling her against his firm chest. "Umph," she exhaled. "You can open your eyes now, Lay," Blake's amused voice said, breaking her from her thoughts. She opened one eye and then the other. His piercing blue eyes held her in a trance, and she gasped for the second time. "I told you I'd catch you," he smiled. A sense of relief and a spark of attraction.